right, folks, I think we're going to get started. Once again, welcome everyone to LSC Digital's webinar, Fueling Your Growth with Accurate Data and Smart Data Management. Learn how to collect, clean, engage, and leverage your data from LSC Digital. This is part of our series that we're doing on a monthly basis to help marketers and companies improve the ROI on their marketing investments from both data and services. And today we'll be covering managing that data. We're very lucky today. My name is Dave Clement. I'm VP of Digital Operations with LSC Digital. And joining us today is Kate McCall, our Director of Data Acquisition, and Brooke Collins is an account manager here at LSC Digital. You guys want to say hello?
Hi.
Hello.
And they're going to talk about data management, how to collect, clean, and engage and leverage your data to maximize your return on investment. So with that being said, just a brief 30-second obligatory commercial that we do at the beginning of all these is that LSC Digital and List Services Corporation, we're a 35-year-old company that specializes in data. So somebody can come to us and say, hey, this is our core people we want to go after, and we can get together those audiences for them and start marketing into them, as well as we are a full service firm. So everything from direct mail to email marketing to search engine optimization, paid advertising, landing page optimization, everything down the road. So let's get moving along. So let's start talking about some data. Here's just some fun facts that I found recently is 90% of all the data that is out there online has really been created in the last 2 years. Also, today it would take a person approximately 181 million years to download all the data from the internet with an average download speed of 44 Mbps. And this is what I found really interesting, and this really pertains to what we'll be talking about today, is that in 2012, roughly 22% of all the data that was out there for analysis coming from surveillance, entertainment, social media, your searches online. About 22% of it you could really use for analysis and market into that. That number is jumping, and they predict it to jump to about 37%. So about a third of all the data that's out there will be able to be analyzed and used for marketing efforts. And we're all starting to see that now just in our daily lives. As far as relevant ads being shown to us, relevant emails, well, that's all coming from data. So what's my point? Point is there's a lot of data out there, okay? And this is just a graph that we found for 2019. Not going to go through it all, but this is just a snapshot of 60 seconds, the amount of data that is generated online. So everything from Facebook has 1 million people log in that minute to the fact that 188 million emails are sent within a minute. And you can go through all this. I'm not going to list everything else, but there's tons of data out there. And this is all data that's available for companies to use for their marketing efforts and other efforts. But the challenge is, this is awesome for marketers, but the challenge is all these companies are purchasing this data, but they quickly find themselves drowning in that data. And that was something I saw, especially at my time at Dun & Bradstreet, which was a data company, is that a lot of companies would buy the data, and there was companies that were killing it, had a great return on investment, and somebody else who was buying the same exact data was getting the opposite. And when we would go out to try to figure out what was going on, guess what? It came down to them just drowning in the data management, really being able to get the most of that investment. And that's what Kate and Brooke are going to talk about today. So you're investing in this data, you're bringing in data. How do you get the most from that data? But also, they're going to talk about common pitfalls that they see with clients, give you some real life examples. And then on top of that, I'll take you through some case studies that I've done of clients that we've worked with as far as on the marketing side to really bring it all together. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Brooke.
So we're going to start out with data ownership. What does data ownership mean? So the official definition is the act of having legal rights and complete control over a single piece or set of data elements. So it really comes down to who is the rightful owner of the data assets, which includes the acquisition, the use, and the distribution policy. Whoever owns the data also has the ability to assign, share, or surrender these privileges, which is really only important in larger companies with huge centralized databases. Which brings us to data sources. Where is your data coming from? You have your customer databases, which are typically people that you have communicated directly with, have purchases from, or possibly from your sales team, and this is automatic ownership. You also have third-party data that can come from a vendor or partner, and an example of this would be a purchase acquisition list, where the rights of the data are defined by whoever is giving you the data. So typically it's a one-time use for a campaign or unlimited use. And that moves on to understand your data sources. So identify your data sources. If it's from a consumer list, is it coming from a form fill or is it coming from a purchase? If it's coming from a third party, where are they getting their data? Do you know how they're collecting it? Do you know where it's sourced from? Additionally, if you're using a third party vendor, do you know how often they update their data, and are you scheduled to receive the data refreshes? And is all data created equal? Obviously, the answer to this one is no. A one-time conference list should be ranked and treated a lot differently than data from a trusted partner. And in an enterprise setting, the term ownership generally assigns a level of accountability and responsibility for specific data sets. And that brings us to our next topic, which is fundamentals of data governance. So the official definition of data governance refers to the general management of the integrity, usability, security, and availability of the data used in the enterprise, which is a fancy way of saying data maintenance. And this can be a cross-departmental team, including voices from varied users. So just make sure if you're getting more than one person involved in your data maintenance that there's strict guidelines on how people are treating your data, and don't get too many hands in the pot because that leaves a lot of margin open for error. And then this can also create functional data flows between applications. An example of this would be your customer order system and your CRM system. And now I'm going to pass it over to Kate so she can talk about pitfalls of maintaining data.
All right, thanks, Steve and Brooke. So now that we understand data ownership and data governance, let's take a look at common pitfalls in maintaining your data. So the first and foremost, as Brooke mentioned, is lack of data ownership. Assigning someone within your organization to be responsible and accountable for your data is crucial. The second, focusing only on new data and/or having a fear of removing or inactivating data. So data is one of your most important assets, but you really shouldn't be afraid to delete it. At the same time, I would never ever advise anybody to go and delete records out of their data without creating a backup first. Data overlay. When data differs, how do you know what data to keep? So this is really a simple answer. The answer is choose your best source and keep data that serves you best. Another pitfall is not understanding all data sources. When you combine data, it's key to understand that these sources are a great opportunity for source coding. So let's take an example here. Let's say that you are purchasing a customer list and you want to be able to track these lists when you're importing them into your database. So you would use source coding to track the performance. Last but not least is duplication. This is a really common occurrence when multiple departments are adding records, and it's a clear waste of money to maintain duplicates within a database. In addition to duplication, there are a number of other data quality issues to look for. The first and foremost is inaccurate address data, and this is probably the most important in my opinion. This is sort of a silly example, but we're going to go through it anyway. So if you have a data entry person who is hitting the A key instead of the I key when entering an address in Washington, Illinois, you might end up sending marketing material to an address in the ghost town of Washington, Alabama, instead of the livelier town of Washington, Illinois. So what's the big deal? It's an A and not an I. Well, the big deal is that not only do you have an inaccurate address, but you're also wasting money on postage and print. The second is incomplete phone numbers. If you operate internationally or in the US, providing sales with incomplete numbers makes their job more difficult and wastes time and money. Last but not least, missing data entries. While you can't force users to enter data that they don't want to enter, you can at least use data quality tools to identify fields within a database that are missing. So an example to avoid this would be to utilize required fields when asking customers or leads for information in online forms.
Can I just add something real
course,
quick here?
please.
And here's a real life example, because one of these things really stuck out to me recently. And I started out my career being very heavily involved with sales. And companies would go out and buy a list, and they would almost always have incomplete phone numbers. And they would go, well, what's the big deal? Just look up the number. So basically what salespeople would turn into is researchers.
Right.
And hours upon hours. And you go, oh, what's the big deal taking 5 minutes to look up a number? Well, if you're expecting that salesperson to be making 7,500 calls a day, 5 minutes 100 times is a lot of time, okay? So things like incomplete phone numbers, inaccurate address data, and I can't stress that enough. When I was at a publisher, they would spend millions of dollars on direct mail pieces, and just having an inaccurate 5% was tens of thousands of dollars of
massive.
wasted revenue. So we really can't encourage everybody enough. Like Kate and her team does a great job when she's acquiring data to really go through that data and find those inaccuracies and kick them back and do further research. So I encourage anybody who takes in data, you really got to take some time with it and find those incomplete numbers, find those inaccurate addresses, because even though it might be 5 to 10%, if you really put that out and do the math of, hey, 5% of your mailings are going to addresses that are junk and are going to get returned, or your salespeople have to look up hundreds of phone numbers, we're talking major money investments there. So I just wanted to pipe that in.
Yeah, definitely. And,
Yep.
and to your point, we're going to talk about a couple of ways to correct this also shortly. So let's take a look at what this actually looks like. Here are two different samples of customer databases that we were looking at. If we start with the top one, you look on the left-hand side, we look at columns, really starting with column C. In the last name, there's numbers and punctuation, right? So we all know that that's garbage. Nobody can mail to David number 1. I mean, maybe they could, but I don't know if it's going to get there. If we start looking over to the right-hand side, you have in columns, is that an E? No, yeah, E, the company, website, job title, it's not complete. So you have some records that do have company or website, you have some that don't. Also looking a little bit closer at the website field, you have different formats of how the URL is in there. No job title, no department, etc. And I'm sure there's a whole slew of other issues if we kept on going to the right there. If you look at the bottom example, starting with the columns B and C on the left-hand side, absolutely no first or last name. And the company, if you can see it there, it says 0 and 1. What is that telling us? Nothing. Again, campaign is blank, website blank, tons of information is blank. So now what? Your data looks like this or has some of these issues. How do we fix it? There are several key attributes to a prosperous database that we look to achieve. Accuracy, completeness, consistency, cost, security, and sustainability. That's a tough one, sorry. There's double S's. And they're all equally as important. So how do we ensure data quality? We do that through a couple different ways. First, data hygiene, keeping records clean, formatted, deduped, and up to date. Email hygiene, used to increase email deliverability. And data appends, which allows us to add data to a record for targeting and analysis purposes. So let's take a deeper dive into a couple of those, starting with data hygiene. There are two main ways to maintain cleanliness of your data. They're merge purge and data refresh. Merge purge utilizes partners to merge records for one or more multiple data sources to eliminate duplicate records. The result is one unique record containing all of the valuable data. So if you look at the example on the left-hand side here, obviously you can see that there is massive, massive duplication happening in this example. And it may seem a little bit extreme, but when you have different people in different departments entering in the data, it's really easy for this to happen, and it's really not that uncommon. Data refresh is key in keeping records current. And this typically includes adding new records that come into your target market, changing or updating different fields, including email or title fields, and also deleting records that are no longer valid. Email hygiene. So what exactly is email hygiene? It's defined as the process of verifying or removing invalid email addresses from an email list. There are a number of reasons why you would want to do this. The first, and probably most obvious one, is that it increases your deliverability. So when you run a list through email hygiene, you're going to get a file back that's coded with different deliverability codes. Those would say, yes, this is deliverable, no, it's not, or this is spam, or I'm really not sure. And obviously that's not what your file is going to be coded as, but that's generally what it's going to say. So when you select only the records that are deliverable, you're getting more records into the inbox, which in the long run is going to save you money by reducing the waste. So if you're paying CPMs on your email deliverability, on your email deployments, the more you deploy that aren't getting delivered, the more money you're wasting. Increased conversion rates. When you increase deliverability, you're reaching more prospects, which will give you a higher conversion rate. And last but definitely not least is an increased email return on investment. So this sounds pretty simple, right? Higher conversion rates with lower cost obviously will give you a higher return on investment.
So here I just want to enter in a real quick shameless plug for LSC Digital. But it's really, I can't stress it enough, especially companies who either have a list that's just kind of been sitting, and you do have to remember that email lists have an expiration date and have attrition. So on average, an email database about over the course of a year can lose about 25% of its accuracy, because people change jobs, people move, people close down email addresses, all that fun stuff. And I've seen that time and time again where somebody will have a list of 200,000 opt-in emails and let it sit for 6 months, go to send it, and they have a gazillion hard bounces and inaccurate data.
Creating all kinds of other problems.
Creating all types of other problems. And then also, too, people purchasing data and, different data sources, things like that. And we have a very inexpensive email verification service here where a client can give us their list. It could be 100,000, 200,000, 400,000, wherever it comes from. We automatically do it for anything we send out for our clients, but we do offer that, and it's really fractions of pennies per email. And time again, when we do this verification, we find 5, 10, 15, 25. We've even found lists that were supposedly already verified from somebody else where 50% of the list was just junk, and that would have been a disaster for the client. And really, for an investment of hundreds of dollars, clients are saving themselves a lot of headaches, really improving the ROI on their data. So if you need some help with that verification of email, if you have a huge list that's just kind of sitting and you're like, I don't know if we want to send these out through our systems, we do have an email verification solution over here, very price conscious and great ROI for a client. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So next up is data appends. What exactly is a data append? Data append is taking known customer data, first name, last name, postal address, and matching it against a database to obtain new information. There are several types of data appends. First, demographic and firmographic appends, where we append a variable to a customer file. On the consumer side, demographic variables that you could append would be things like age, household income, home ownership, presence of children, behavioral or interest variables, a whole slew of different information to allow you to gain more information on your customers. On the B2B side, some firmographics that you could append would be employee size, sales volume, location type, and many more. Email Appends utilizes a postal address to provide customers with an email address. So that's pretty basic to understand. But an example here would be that if you have a customer database with a postal address, and let's say you wanted to run some digital campaigns, so you would take your postal file, run it through an email append, get as many email addresses as you could, and then utilize those to either run an email campaign, or you could also upload them to Facebook, utilizing the custom audiences, or other opportunities with display and banner ads. The reverse append is exactly what it sounds like, the reverse of that. So you use an email address to provide customers with a postal address. So let's say that you had collected emails maybe from a lead generation program and you only got email and first name. So now you want to market these people through postal mail and to follow up and hit them up through multiple channels. So you would take your email address list, you would run it through a reverse append, and you would glean as many postal addresses that you could to then send them a direct mail campaign. With all of these appends, the match rate can really vary. It's generally, the range I would say is 30 to 50%. It really depends on the quality of the data that you're putting into the append or through the process. I have seen appends come out a lot higher at 70, 75, 80%. And I've also seen them come out a lot lower at 7, 10%. So to bring this back together, we know our ownership rights, we have a dedicated resource to maintaining our data, and we have the tools to upkeep it. Now we're able to use our data to our advantage by integrating it with your CRM. This is a great quote I found on data integration. Data integration can pose multiple challenges during the implementation process if you do not approach it the right way. Successful data integration requires knowledge and thorough planning. So here are some key questions you should answer before any integration takes place at all. And this is really like the who, what, why, and where. The first one, defining data integration. What exactly are you going to be integrating? The second, what's the formatting of the data sources? How do you plan on integrating it? What's going to link it together? Third, defining KPIs of the data. What is the purpose of integrating this to begin with? Why are you doing it? Fourth, do you have the infrastructure to support the integration? And last, what are the costs that are involved in the integration?
Actually, can we take a step back? I have a question as we go in here. So number 4, do you have the infrastructure to support the integration? And I'm assuming this is because I see it all the time in marketing. People's, the old saying, people's eyes are a lot bigger than their stomach.
Yeah.
They're going to do all this marketing automation and stuff. And then when they start getting, they're like, oh, can you give me like a real life example when somebody who's taking in a ton of data where the infrastructure can't support the integration that you've seen?
I can give you the best answer that I can think of because it's really a production technical question. So infrastructure would be what's actually holding the database. How many fields are you going to end up with? So let's, an example would be going into it. Let's say you have first name, last name, address, email. Well, now I've decided that I'm going to not only run this through a data append, but I'm going to integrate my sales leads with my customer database. So now you have information on the actual customer. So you're adding fields for, I'm making this up, age, income, presence of children, whatever else you decide to add. And then you're going to have all the information that you were holding in your sales database. And if you decide to move that all over, and all of the information that you were holding in your customer database. So having the infrastructure to support all of the fields from all those different sources that you're combining back together. Does it exist? Can you only house 12 fields and let's say 1 million records? Or can you house 30 fields and 5 million records?
Okay, cool.
So here are some avenues that can help in answering these 5 questions. First would be understanding all of your data sources, kind of like we just talked about, and repositories and the workflows between them. So like in the example I just gave Dave, like, are there fields that are the same in your different sources coming together? Which one are you going to take as the field that is overriding? Which leads us to identifying key fields that can link the source data to your existing data. Are you using a customer or account ID number that will easily link the databases together? And last but not least, and here's a shameless plug, but seek assistance from outside vendors and partners with things like data mapping and updating existing and new records. And obviously, as Dave mentioned, we have the ability here to do things like email hygiene, the data appends, and all sorts of other services that can help with all of these issues. Do you have any questions, Dave? If not, with that, I'm going to turn it back to you to take us further into the CRM integration.
Great, thanks, Kate. So, Kate and Brooke have done a great job of talking about data, what you need to be thinking about to get the most out of that data, your infrastructure, questions you should be asking your team, who should be in charge of what infrastructure. So now let's bring this all together, and then we'll go into some questions from there. So, you guys have all seen, everybody on this thing, a nice, clean, in a perfect world, this is how our marketing works. So really, over here is the driver of everything, the data, okay? We can talk about, information like name, address, job title, company size, all that fun stuff, and saying, hey, these are the people. Another thing that we do a lot of with our clients is IP targeting. So many of our clients come to us and say, hey, these are the companies that we want to go after. And every headquarters, every Wi-Fi has their own IP address. And we're able to serve ads just to those folks, just to those IPs. And then that ties back into our keywords and the actual individuals, because going off the previous examples, we can say, hey, this company's IP, we got to click on that ad. We can go to our data and say, hey, these job titles are the ones that we could go after. We should be calling those people, or we should be calling those, sending emails to those folks. And I'll give you a real life example. And then once again, in a perfect world, using all this data, you're sending them ads, you're sending them emails, you're driving them to landing pages, and you're tracking that all through a CRM system, and it's a continuous loop. And then people that fill out that form or hit that lead scoring threshold, you have your prospects, your marketing prospects, things that go over to sales, things that sales are excited to go after, and then a closing deal. But once again, this is a perfect world, but what's the real world? And what are things that we really need to think about? So with that being said, I'm actually going to give you an example of a use case of one of our clients. And I'll talk a little bit about the results that they got, but I'll also talk about a little bit of their strategies and some of the challenges that they ran into. So here's the funnel, okay? So this was a client. Here's a little bit of the backstory of the client in this use case. Great client in the benefits space in the healthcare industry, okay? And this is actually very common, which we run into. They originally came through us for a data purchase. Hey, these are the companies that we want to go after. These are the size, these are the titles, and we want to get information for our sales team. And we're going to do all this deployment through Pardot, through marketing automation, tied into our sales force, highly qualify the leads, head it over to our sales team, and we're going to make billions upon billions upon billions of dollars, okay?
Everyone's dream.
Everybody's dream, okay? So, so they bought data from us, and 4 months go by, and they still haven't launched their campaigns. So that's where LSC hopped in. They were having challenges. Does this sound familiar to anybody? Well, they spent a fortune on enterprise level Salesforce, but nobody really knew how to use Salesforce in their organization, okay? And nobody was really owning it at the end of the day. They spent a small fortune on Pardot because that integrates with Salesforce, but once again, nobody really knew how to use Salesforce. Once again, very skilled, highly skilled marketers, but going back to my previous point, A lot of times, and I've seen this time and time again, is organizations, their eyes are a little bit bigger than their stomach, and they buy these huge systems, and at the end of the day, they almost use them like they would a Constant Contact or a MailChimp. They could have spent a fraction of dollars because there's a lot of work involved with setting up those marketing automations. So LSC, hopped in, said, hey, how can we help you? Let's help you get these deployments. Let's help you with Salesforce. And this is how it all kind of panned out at the end of the day. So this client had about 19,000 records in their Salesforce. Weren't really sure of the quality of this data. They weren't really sure of where this data came from, how old it was. Also, and once again, to a lot of people on this call, on this webinar, does this sound familiar? They were expecting their sales team to be managing the data quality, okay? And we all know, and this isn't a bad thing, salespeople are not crazy about deleting records, or changing names or removing something. So if you're looking for your sales team to manage that, that's not really fair, okay? And you really need to have somebody outside the sales chain to really be managing that for obvious reasons. So, that's something that we're helping them work through. So they had these 19,000. The very first thing we did was verify all of those records. So we basically did our email verification, merge, purge, all that fun stuff to ultimately clean up the database, okay? And any empty records we started filling. Plus, they did a data purchase with us. They said, hey, we want to go after these people at these companies. So what that translated into was a starting database of roughly almost 37,000 unique contacts, okay? Now those 36,900 unique contacts, we started doing email marketing to those folks, okay? Very simple. They had a 3 email series, and they would email this, find some interest, drive them to a landing page in the hopes of getting a form fill, following up, handing over to the sales team, and closing deals. Very typical, okay, approach. So, of those almost 37,000 unique contacts, we delivered, okay, over 200,000 emails into those 36,000. But wait a sec. If you only have 37,000 unique contacts, how'd you guys deliver over 200,000 emails with only 3 creative? Well, this is very important. We just didn't send to this audience and, hope if they open, hope one send, hey, they opened it. If they didn't, they didn't. We sent them a second one. No, we really, and it was kind of a running, for lack of a better word, joke. We really squeezed a lot of juice out of those 3 emails. So if we sent to somebody and they didn't open, we resent that email to them with a different subject line, okay? Or we resent, and they still didn't open, we resent that email at a different time. Some people are more engaged in the morning than they are the afternoon. So we continually kept on changing very simple elements. We weren't changing creative at all, actually. We were just changing subject lines, days, and time of day, and continually improving overall engagement. Just like in sales, any guy, if there's anybody on this call in sales, look, the first time you call somebody, it's very rare they pick up the phone and you get a lead. Usually have to call that person multiple times and catch them. If it was that simple, nobody would need to hire salespeople. Okay, you need to really work those leads, and that's really what we were doing through email. So ultimately, those little over 200,000 unique emails turned into a little over 4,500 unique mail opens. And I want to take a second and stay on this a little bit. Think about that. If you had a marketing effort where your total universe you're going after is almost 37,000 people, and of those 37,000 people, you are able to get 4,500 of those people to engage with your message, that would be huge. That's over a 10% engagement rate. No marketing efforts have those types of results. So you were able to get 1 out of 10 people to engage in your message, okay? That's great. That's awesome. And we started to do something a little bit different here. Because when I started out, they had the typical approach, and maybe this sounds familiar, is that, hey, we send emails to these folks, we get a form fill, we hand off to sales that form fill, okay? Now, the challenge is with that approach, and, this is probably a lot of people's experience on the call, are those people interested in that free thing you're offering for a form fill, or do they really want to talk to a salesperson, okay? Typically, more often than not, they want that free thing you're offering, that awesome white paper, that free download, whatever it may be, that free trial that you're offering. So we changed it up a little bit. And we were able to hand off of those 4,500 unique people, we were able to hand off a little over 350 leads to sales. Well, how did we qualify those 4,500 unique emails open? So those 4,500 email opens, we didn't hand them all to sales, but we also weren't just looking for a lead form. We developed a very specific lead scoring methodology with them, okay? And to be honest with you, we actually had very few actual form fills, okay? What we did have was people opening emails, people clicking emails. So if somebody opened an email and clicked through but didn't convert, but navigated the site and then opened the second email, that was given certain scores, okay, throughout the whole process. And by working with our client to do a very specific lead scoring methodology of really looking at 3 things, explicit, implicit, and negative information, we were able to start handing off highly qualified people, not based off of just a form fill. Form fill was something that we scored, but honestly, we had very few form fills. We had a lot of opens, we had a lot of clicks, we had a lot of navigations on the site, a lot of clicks on ads, and we put all those together. And the reason I bring up explicit, implicit, and negative, that's really the data you got to work from, okay? I see way too often, whether the time at LSC, whether my time at D&B or time before that, is that people come up with some real interesting theories on why they should follow up and why they shouldn't follow up, okay? Everything from time of year to, gender to you name it. I've heard some interesting theories. You really need to stick to these criteria of explicit information. So that's the title, that's the location, that's the industry, that's the size of the company. That's the lead source that Kate and Brooke talked about a little bit. So a VP, getting an engagement from a VP is a lot more at that company, is scored a lot higher than the director, for example, okay? Or the location, hey, that's somebody at the headquarters versus a satellite office. So those types of things. And those you can take at face value. Like there's nothing, that you can really, hey, that person's a VP, they're the VP, period. And then there's the implicit information. So that's the website visits, the phone calls. So them taking some type of action, okay? That's opening, that's the form fills. And then there's also the negative. Look, if nobody's opening up or clicking on your ads, they're not interested, okay? Hey, you had a phone call with somebody. There was no budget. Doesn't matter they think you're great. If they have no budget or if they have no authority to spend anything, they're not the right people talking to. So we had a very specific methodology based around, hey, when do we hand this over to sales? So let me stress again for the 4th time, very few form fills, okay? So if we would have been dozens of leads passed over to sales instead of hundreds if we were doing form fills. Now, of those 359 leads that we passed to sales, 35 of those turned into meaningful conversations, okay? Now, think about that. 1 out of every 10 of those leads turned into a meaningful conversation, okay? Now, I know as a salesperson, if I got 10 leads from marketing and one of them actually turned into a really, hey, this is something we're looking for, this is where we need to be, I want to talk more about it, that would be huge, okay? If anybody's on marketing and sales on this call, 1 out of 10 meaningful conversations that sales was reporting back was, hey, 1 out of every 10 was a real meaningful conversation. Sales definitely wanted to follow up on these leads that we were sending them. So of those 35, 8 actually turned into opportunities. So now think about that. 1 out of every 4 conversations are turning into proposals. Okay. Once again, very huge. Okay. And then finally, out of those 8, they won a little over $700,000 in new business. And I'll tell everybody on this call without going, they were nowhere near that with us. Trust me, fractions, less than a few single percents, okay, was their investment in marketing. So how did that all happen? Look, the backbone of all of this is data management, okay? Going back to the beginning of this slide, they were stalled. They had the investment, they had the tools, okay? They had the smart people, okay? Very smart people. I love working with this client. But they didn't have governance of the data. Nobody was really in charge of the data. Nobody was really in charge of the quality of the data, plus the systems weren't in place to manage that data, okay? So looking at this graph, okay, they had a lot of gold in those hills, okay? But just because their data management wasn't there, from the initial cleaning of that data, but the ongoing management of that data, they were stalled. They weren't moving forward, okay? And then once they were able to move forward and get that under control, they were able to generate, in about 4 months, a lot of revenue, okay? So things that I hear all the time, you know, in past life, a big part of my job was flying out to places with people that were having problems with their data or weren't seeing the investment. You know what the number one killer was when I went out there? Who's managing your data? The sales team is managing your data. Or we all kind of manage it. We're all kind of responsible for managing data. That was the kiss of death, okay? Oh, we're going to give you all this data. So what if you already have some of these records? What's the rules, okay? Because this would kill people all the time. They wouldn't even think about it. They would upload all this new data and overwrite all this information that was already in there from the salesperson. So the salesperson will log in one day and all his call notes were gone, the email was different, and they were ready to murder somebody. So these are things that you got to think about. And I think Kate and Brooke did an awesome job today. And that's something that we really help companies with. And that's something where LSC, we're very lucky as far as a lot of agencies, is that since we are a data company at our heart, we're able to skip a few steps. How many people on this call are working with an agency, and I'm sure they do a great job, okay? But they're looking for form fills, and you have nothing to work with until you get that form fill. Well, we have the data. We know John Smith is the VP at this company you want to call into. We already know that. Now it's about getting John Smith engaged with your message. And that's where LSC kind of brings it all together between our data and our marketing services. And with that being said, that's our presentation for today. Now going through, it doesn't look like we have any questions except saying they can hear us well, which is awesome.
Always good.
Which is good, because we would have wasted about 50 minutes. But with that being said, you know, unless there's some questions, and once again, we're going to be sending this out to everybody. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us, but also to email us. But before we wrap it up, is there anything, Brooke or Kate, you guys want to add to today's presentation?
I don't think so. I think you really brought it all home with the real life client example, and you know, just stressing once again that here at LSC, that's one of our strengths, is that we started as a data company and we've evolved on that.
Great, Brooke.
What Kate said.
Awesome.
Very well put.
Great. But once again, I can't stress enough, we will be sending this presentation out to everybody. And there'll also be contact information if you have any follow-up questions. But also, too, we do put all these videos on our YouTube channel, and we do edit them out for time as well. So definitely check out our YouTube channel. It's if you just go to YouTube and type LSC Digital, or I think it's YouTube/LSC Digital. We have everything from data to marketing efforts, to what's going on with Google, what's going on with email, all that fun stuff that people really enjoy. And keep an eye out for future webinars and our weekly email newsletter. I hope everybody has a great rest of their day.